You've got a great business, a great service that could serve many, many people. You've heard about podcast interviews and you think, wow, this is a great way to grow my business and grow my brand. I can use it for lead generation. And then you hear somebody say, well, no, podcast interviews cannot be used as lead generation. I've heard it so many times that I sometimes call it a myth, but honestly, it's a lie. And it reminds me of that old joke, what's the difference between a used car salesman and a self-proclaimed internet marketer? Well, the used car salesman knows when he's lying to you. You see, podcast interviews are an awesome lead generation, but just doing the interview won't get you the leads. Hi, this is Tom Schwab, and we have done this for now over 6 years with over 500 clients on 20,000 interviews, all through Interview Valet. And we've used a system and a process called podcast interview marketing to move people from being a passive listener to an active visitor to an engaged lead. And let me tell you a couple stories behind this. Like one was Matt Miller with School Spirit Vending. He came to us early on. He was trying to sell franchises. And he came back to us and said, podcast interviews, they don't work. I've been on like 18 and I've gotten 5 leads from it. I said, okay. Well, I listened to his podcast interviews and he was missing a couple of vital things. And it's like, no wonder it doesn't work. That podcast interview, it's like chumming the water, right? In the old Jaws movie, you put some great content out there to attract people, but you did nothing to hook them and get them on the boat. We worked with another client that said we were the 3rd podcast booking agency they worked with. And they're like, we've done over 100 interviews. How come we didn't know about this formula? And I said, well, because the people you were working with told you exactly what they did, right? They were bookers. They got you on a show. They connected you with a host, but their focus wasn't on podcast interview marketing. You were missing 2 of the vital steps. And they're not a secret. We talk about them. I've written a book, Podcast Guest Profits, about it. And I'll tell you what they are here. Most people are missing this, and that's why they're not getting leads. Sure, they'll get the SEO value from the backlinks. Sure, they'll get social media mentions. Sure, they'll get exposure that brings other opportunities, but they're just not seeing it on lead generation. And here's what they're missing. And ask yourself, are you missing it too? The first one is calls to actions, offers that meet people where they are. Now, every digital marketer will tell you, or they'll repeat, that you should always use one call to action, a single call to action. Now, that's true on a landing page. That's true on a Facebook ad, but it's not true on podcast interviews. And this isn't my opinion. This is something we have tested over and over. We have found that 3 calls to action always work best. A small yes, a medium yes, and a heck yes. And as I shared this with people that sell from the stage or do, keynote presentations, they're like, oh, exactly, right? You've got to meet people where they are. Often the buyer's journey goes back to digital marketing. Do they come in at the top of the funnel with just interest and awareness? Do they come in at the middle of the funnel where they're considering different options? Or do they come in at the bottom of the funnel where they're ready to make a decision? Now, if you're on your website, it's very easy to figure out where they are by what they download, right? It's called the buyer's journey, basic inbound marketing. But when you're talking to a crowd, when you're talking to a crowd physically or digitally on a podcast interview, you've got all these different people and you've got people that make decisions differently. So if you just give them one call to action that says, go to my Facebook group and join our group. Well, some people don't want to do that, right? Some people aren't on Facebook. They don't want that commitment. Other people are ready to buy. They've listened to you for 30 or 45 minutes. They come with credit card in hand. they don't want to be in a Facebook group. They just want to talk to the wizard and start working with you. So when you're on a podcast interview, when you're talking on any stage, make it easy for people to interact with you where they are. So we talked about the small yes, the medium yes, and the heck yes. The small yes is just something to move them along, get them back to the website, get them an easy win. Now, sometimes people are interested, but they don't have the time to do it, right? They don't have the time to read your book or start your 30-day class or attend your 4-day master class, right? They may be a great candidate, a great customer, but that's too big of an ask. So give them something small. Give them a checklist. Give them an infographic. Give them a summary of your book. One of the things that we use that's very effective is an assessment, a podcast interview marketing assessment. It's just a dozen questions, answer those, and find out if this will work for you. Everybody wants an answer. So that's the small yes. Doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't take a big commitment of money, right? That medium yes, right? They're a little bit more interested. Maybe they'll take the time to read your book or listen to your book. Maybe they'll take the time to come back for a training. You know, there's a great way of moving people along in the relationship. I've already heard you on a podcast interview. The next thing in building that relationship could be a face-to-camera training, a face-to-camera video. Maybe it's some case reports. Maybe it's a tripwire product, a smaller product that doesn't cost as much and doesn't take as much time. So that's the medium. The final one is, if I have heard you on a podcast interview and I like what you do, it's like, wow, this person knows me. You understand me. I want to work with you. For God's sake, don't slow them down in a funnel, right? Whales don't click and big fish don't swim through funnels. You don't want lead generation there. You want sales generation. And this is what our clients have told us. And we work with a lot of software as service companies, and they track down their cost of lead acquisition and their cost of customer acquisition to the penny. And what they tell us is that the cost of lead acquisition, COLA, and the cost of customer acquisition, COCA, is among the lowest with the channel of podcast interview marketing. The other thing is that leads tend to close faster. Sales close faster because someone has already listened to you. They've listened 30 to 45 minutes. They've probably looked around your site. They've checked you out. They've already been introduced to you by a trusted advisor who is the podcast host. So that lead comes to you as a hot lead that closes quicker. So that could be one reason why you're not getting leads out of a podcast. The other one is that you're not making it easy for them to go to a place, right? So picture yourself as a podcast listener. All right. I've listened to you. I'm interested in you. I want to work with you. I want to learn more. Well, where do I go? I'm always amazed when people will say, well, join our Facebook group, or follow me on Twitter, or email me, or call me at this phone number. It's like, first of all, that's a big step to just call me. Not everybody is there. The other thing is that, do I've got to do all this work to find you and what you're called and what your company is called? Which Tom Schwab in Kalamazoo are you? Don't make them hunt you down. For God's sake, don't send them just directly to your homepage, because I guarantee you that this podcast interview will be heard for months, for years, and your homepage better change in that time. And the problem is we've got evergreen content that you're sending to more or less a dynamic homepage. So once that homepage changes, and you talked about, your new offer, this or that, somebody hears you on a podcast interview 6 months from now, they're going to come to that site and go, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. Maybe, I don't know. And they'll get frustrated and leave. So you want to take evergreen content and send it to an evergreen page. Now, this could be one page for all of your podcast interviews. Send them to yoursite.com/podcast. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to send them to yourpage.com/ the name of the podcast or something about the podcast. This is very, very powerful because now you can attribute all of your traffic. So if you come to interviewvalet.com/EM for Eventual Millionaire, I know that you came from hearing me on Jamie Masters' podcast, Eventual Millionaire. I've given that example away so many times that it's either you listen to me on that podcast or you heard me talk here. But either way, podcasts can be a great lead generation, but just showing up and talking won't do it. You need to have a system. You need to have a process to move people from being a passive listener to an active visitor to an engaged lead. If you'd like to learn more about it, I'll put a link to the book, Podcast Guest Profits, down below. Or if you'd like to talk with us, you can find a time going to interviewvalet.com and just schedule an assessment. We'd love to talk with you and find out how you could use podcast interview marketing.